Hello, hello.
Welcome
back to another episode of the Blockument.
Woo!
Crypto education through everyday conversations.
Oh, nailed it.
I know. I'm like an expert over here.
I'm so proud of you.
Right. So I'm one of your hosts, Nate Talbot from Detroit Blockchain Center. And to my right is the fantabularvelous. That sounded
Making a word. I'm Ashlee Rose. I am an everyday mother. I'm an online reseller, and I'm on a journey to figure out what in the whoozy whatsy is going on with all of this crypto, blockchain stuff. What is it? And who owns it? What?
Well, we're fastly approaching the halving, so now is a good time to sort of know what's going on with all this stuff. You feel like you're knowledgeable enough, or you still feel like you got a lot to learn?
I have a lot to learn.
A lot to learn.
That's why we're doing a podcast. If we didn't have a lot to learn, we wouldn't be doing a podcast. We'd be, pack it up, we're done.
Yeah, pack it up, we're done. All right.
Yeah, but there's a lot to learn. But I do feel like I can have a decent conversation with people and have opinions and things to add, value to add.
Okay, value added. Cool. Well, one day I'm going to come in with my questions. You're going to be the one answering them all for me.
Believe me, I fully expect that.
Good. We'll start next week.
Fabulous.
What block time is it?
It is, let's take a look here. So the block height is 815,450.
Mm-hmm.
That block size is 1.57 megabytes, which is comprised of 3,985 transactions. Let's see here. And the total subsidies and fees won for that block was 6.78 Bitcoin, which equals $236,655 US dollars. And the miners that won that are F2 Pool.
F2 Pool. All right. We're going to prep a episode on going a deeper dive into these block explorers, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're dying to know more.
Yep.
I just had we were at a meetup and somebody else was asking about the block explorers too.
Oh, perfect. You can point them to our episode in a couple weeks.
Yeah. All right. So what's our question of the day today?
Who is the owner of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other cryptos? Who's the owner?
Well, I own some, so I'm an owner.
Of all three? Of all those? Of every crypto that ever existed?
Of everything that ever existed. I am a shitcoiner to the max. Total degen.
Mm-hmm.
No, who is the owner? Who actually owns the main thing, the network?
Well, yeah, like that, or are we going to get big S word for having this,
Oh, who owns the logos and the website?
Yeah, and who's the guy pulling all the strings, orchestrating things,
Good question. So that is actually, it's not very contentious in some networks. It's very contentious in other networks. And it's actually part of, I don't know, I probably would have said this in one of our do your own research episodes. A key thing, and you know how I feel about decentralization in general, but in specific, a key point of all of that is there is no sort of entity that can push anything, right? So if you have a project, what I was saying in the do your own research episode, I think, or I should have been saying, is if a project launches and has its own official website, well, that's probably a good sign that it's not decentralized.
Right, because somebody has to own the website.
Yeah, an
or
official
the domain name.
Yep. And
but what if what if somebody owns Bitcoin.com or
somebody does own Bitcoin.com,
right?
And Bitcoin.org,
so
and
then that
Bitcoin.net. Probably Bitcoin.eth,
Dot
probably
gov.
Bitcoin.gov. Well, now I got to see Bitcoin.gov.
But like, couldn't that be like perceived as somebody like that person owning it or having an owner? Like,
Yeah, it's not so much about the website; it's about the advertising, right? And we'll get to the actual question. This doesn't really answer your question, but you think back to, especially like the 2020 bull run that we had. There was a lot of television commercials. There was a lot of celebrity endorsements for different
Right.
projects. And that's what usually causes confusion, right? So people will say like, well, Bitcoin has a website. Bitcoin has a couple websites. There is no Bitcoin.gov. That's coming to address not found. There's, you can have the website, but like when you have an ad, there's never been like a Bitcoin commercial. There hasn't been an ETH commercial, right?
but there could be. That's like the confusing part.
Well, this
like
is what
I
they're
could
selling.
run one if I wanted to.
You could, but like who's really running it? And that becomes a question. So when it comes to like who owns it, right? Like you have, like you were asking about the logo. So I think we discussed on another episode, that's not the original Bitcoin logo, right? Satoshi did his rounds of trying to make a couple different versions.
Yeah.
So whoever starts a protocol owns it, right? This is the key to nothing is born decentralized, right? Because one person conceives it or one small entity conceives it, they have it. They have to get it distributed.
Right.
This is sort of what the world of open source is all about. So when it comes to like Bitcoin, we'll start there as we normally do. You have Bitcoin.com, which is actually owned by a guy named Roger Ver, who is a proponent, used to be a Bitcoin individual, but wasn't happy with several aspects of Bitcoin, especially around how businesses can profit off of it. They wanted to make these fundamental core changes to it. The Bitcoin community in general, this is like the largest contention thing. This is called the Big Block, right? The block size wars.
Oh, okay.
And he split that off to be Bitcoin Cash, right? So now you have like Bitcoin Cash. That eventually split off. So you have Bitcoin Cash, and then there was another Bitcoin variant from that. But neither of those are the Bitcoin that you're looking at, right? And that was one of the questions: who gets to own the logo and whatnot?
Right.
Well, nobody owns the logo, right? This is it was gifted to the community, right? This guy named BitBoy, not that one, created the logo, posted it on the forum, and it just sort of caught on to be the thing. And as the creator, but at that point when he created it, especially if this BitBoy was American, right? When you create something, an image, it's yours by default. You don't have to file a copyright or anything. It's just yours, unless you give it over to the public domain. And that's essentially what happened. So anybody is now free to use that.
Wait, so since nobody owns it, could somebody file to own it?
Well, they could try, right? But then you have to prove authorship, that you actually authored it. You can't just say like, hey, here's this thing everybody's been using for 15 years and now I own it today, right?
Oh, yeah.
No, that's just not how copyright
Like it wouldn't
law
go
works.
to the highest bidder. That's great to know.
No, not for copyrights.
What if you made like a really small change to it, but like...
No, think of it this way. What if you took Pepsi's logo and made a really small change to it, and then you'd be like, that's mine now. Yeah, no, it's just not how it works. Once it's in the public, it has to be a significant change, right? It has to be, I forgot the exact wording now, because I forgot my breakfast bourbon, so my brain's not where it needs to be. But you have to make a significant change to original work in order to claim a new copyright to it. And this is true with everything: music, film, art, books, whatever. Okay. So then you have like Bitcoin.org, though. And so people will be like, well, somebody owns Bitcoin.org. Well, Satoshi originally owned Bitcoin.org, right? And then pass the keys off and keeps passing the keys off. So yeah, somebody owns Bitcoin.org. You can't have a decentralized website yet, right? Where plenty of systems are working on that.
Yeah.
But the domain name is in a decentralized function, right? This is what our friends over at like the .eth realm are trying to work on. And where the first NFT was created on Bitcoin, color coins, so you could have domain names that were decentralized. But at the moment, that's not a main thing. That's not a real thing. So Bitcoin.org is owned by somebody, but it's not owned by anybody that has any significant influence over the Bitcoin network.
Right.
Right? They can do whatever they want to with Bitcoin.org, with Bitcoin.com, with Bitcoin.anything. Anybody can put out advertising. And this is one of the key things of even decentralization, especially in like a proof of work type setup. Anybody can own the coins, right? You have this guy, Michael Saylor, who's been buying up a lot of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right?
A lot is an understatement.
Right? It doesn't matter how many coins he holds.
Right.
He has no influence over how I run my node or the transactions I make. More coins doesn't equal more votes, doesn't equal more control, power, sway.
Just your node equals votes, right?
No, your node, your node sort of equals a vote because you get to choose the software. So what people use Bitcoin.org for, primarily two things, which was hosting the white paper and some FAQs about Bitcoin and downloading. It's become a trusted source to download the Bitcoin software if you're interested in it. It's not the only source. It's not the official source. It's just the place people go when they do it. But that's also very dangerous, right? Because we don't know who, at any point the owner of Bitcoin.org could swap.
Yeah. Right.
Right? And it could become malicious software.
Wait, did you say who owns Bitcoin.org? Or we don't know that?
We collectively do know it. I'm just not sure who's actually which
Currently.
owner is the right now. So I won't
comment
say
on
it
No
because I don't know if it's accurate. But you can look it up. You can go to you can look it up on DNS.
So do you think, is there a case to be made if that there's, like, let's say it's that person who owns Bitcoin.org, is there a case to be made that they have influence over people and thus influence over, like, the changes that are made or, like, the direction in which it goes?
I think it's undeniable that somebody who has something as common as that doesn't have any influence. They don't have influence over the direction it necessarily takes as in development because it's not the development team. Now, so here's some differences, and this would be a good gateway to sort of talk about the differences here between this and ETH and then other cryptos down the road, right? So if you have like the Twitter handle at Bitcoin, which somebody does, and nobody really knows who it is, of course you have influence, but it's not an official Bitcoin.
Yeah.
For a while, Bitcoin Cash owned the at Bitcoin handle.
Wow.
Right? So, and same thing with Reddit, right? The Bitcoin, I can't remember if it's the Bitcoin subreddit or the BTC subreddit, is actually Bitcoin Cash subreddit.
Wow.
And the other one is a Bitcoin subreddit, right? And it gets really confusing because nobody owns the name, so anybody can use it. And so the most important thing in a realm where you don't really have a centralized team controlling anything is for everybody else, the educators, the yous of the world, when people ask these questions is, don't trust. Remember, don't trust, verify, right? Don't trust Bitcoin.org. Don't trust at Bitcoin. Don't trust Bitcoin.com. Don't trust anybody. Verify
But
your own
you
stuff.
could use it like to cross-reference, though, right? Like,
yeah. So like
just like use it as a tool.
One of the key things about Bitcoin, right? You have Bitcoin Core. This is a debate. There's not one version of the software. People often don't know this either.
Yeah, no,
right?
that's very interesting.
There are several versions of Bitcoin software. Bitcoin Core, that's sort of the name when you hear people talking about, oh, you're a core developer or something. It's turned into an attempt to be a slander, talking about how centralized it is. But one of the ethos of Bitcoin in general, because there is no, again, singular viewpoint,
Right.
is that you should only have one software, because that way all the eyes are on this one version of this software. So if there's a problem with it, if there's a bug, if something needs to be changed, everybody's looking at it. The more eyes on something, this is the heart of an open source project, which is another way to tell if your chain, how decentralized or censorship resistant your chain really is. It's nature and open source. So we should probably do an episode on that one day, right?
Write that down.
But yeah, so one of the core Bitcoin ethos is work on one main version, even though there's like 5 or 6 different versions, by prominent Bitcoiners who are developers, and the core consensus rules, right? There'll only be 21 million, the distribution, the halving, the hash rate, how proof of work works, all of that stuff is the same, right? It's just things of maybe how wallets might interact. There might be very small, what features are turned on by default. These are the little changes between the different networks.
What would like a layman's terms comparison be to like how it's able to have 2 different softwares running the same thing? Am I even wording that right?
No, yeah, it's, I mean, just think about think of any software that you've ever used, Microsoft Word, right? So every now and then you'll get a notice, hey, there's an update. Well, it's the same program, right? When you download the update, it's functionally the exact same program.
Right.
There's just small little difference, maybe a difference in the interface or how it reacts, or maybe it's just fixing a bug, right? There's not really any noticeable difference. It's the exact same thing. Those are all the same core version of Microsoft Word, but you have version 1, 1.2, 1.4, 2.3. What's the key differences there? Versus Microsoft Word versus Google Docs.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Those are 2
next.
fundamentally different programs. They do the same thing. They're both word processing documents, but they're at their core very, very different.
So those 2, the Google Docs and the Microsoft Word, are not an example.
The Google Docs and Microsoft Word would be like Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin.
Okay.
Ethereum and ETH Classic.
Oh,
There's
okay.
core fundamental changes to the underlying software versus a difference between the Bitcoin versions, or if you move over to ETH, which has a very different ethos, they actually believe in having several different core versions of the Ethereum network you can download. Again, they all share the same
So
base
they
rules.
like that there's different softwares.
Yeah, their mindset is, well, yes, having all eyes pointed at one source code is useful, but if everybody misses the boat, the entire network goes down. If you diversify it between a few,
Right.
you have 3, 4, 5 different core clients. If a crisis happens with
Right.
one network, the entire network doesn't suffer. Only a portion.
Essentially decentralizing the software.
Core. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Now, in the comparison of like updates for Microsoft Word, would there then be a case that one of the softwares is a newer update than the other, or like one is better than the other? Or that doesn't really matter?
Well, this is where like words start mattering. So the updating software isn't the greatest analogy because you can update one of these core softwares too. So that's where it all falls apart with the comparison.
But it's close enough to kind of like, okay, I get it.
So no, there is no necessarily better. The whole point of anything where there's no owner is who gets to make the final decision, right? And that's really it. So think about this when you're thinking about blockchains and these networks. I'm using Bitcoin, you're using ETH, somebody else is using, we'll just call it XYZ, right?
Okay.
Which can be any other crypto. If with Bitcoin's ethos of really focus on one software implementation, and they decide to make a change to that software implementation that I don't agree with as a user, a miner doesn't agree with, right? A business doesn't agree with. Only the developers did this, right?
Right.
Do I have to upgrade? Do I have an option?
Right.
And the answer is yes, I have an option because I control my node. if I run my own node,
Yeah.
and this is why having your own node is so important, that whole not your keys, not your coins goes beyond the 12 words, right? It really comes down to running your own little software node. So you have your own copy of the blockchain. And if I don't like the way they change the rules, even if it's a small, significant rule, RBF on or off,
Right.
then
Yeah.
I don't have to run it. I can keep my own version. Or maybe I'm not that great with software development and I can keep my own version, but I'm afraid about the updates.
Right.
This is where that sort of, for you on the Ethereum side, you don't like something they do, you can just easily hop over to one of the other major
Right.
software implementations
And like
of it.
watch from afar, make sure it's working out okay. Okay, it looks okay. Now I'm gonna get back in.
Yeah. So you have these options. There are networks like XYZ. If there's a real XYZ network, please don't
Yeah.
mean bomb me and shit. I'm not talking about yours. There's
Yeah.
10 billion coins. I'm sure there's probably is. I
There
don't know what
certainly
that
is.
is though. I don't know nothing about the official XYZ.
Yeah,
but
that's a good call.
if you have whatever other token, there are networks where it's like, all right, well, we're going to do an update, so we're going to pause the network.
Okay.
Well, who gets to pause the network?
Yeah, that's very confusing.
Right.
Like the fact that you can pause the network is kind of a red flag.
It is kind of a red flag.
Because then that means like if the government's like, hey, I'm gonna need you to pause this network.
Exactly. This is the point of
Right.
the censorship resistant piece.
Right,
And why you
okay.
do need to decentralize this piece. So there is no one individual or small group of individuals that can make that choice. So if you can pause the network, or if you can force an upgrade to all the users,
Then there's like most likely an owner.
then there is definitely an owner.
Definitely an owner.
Yeah. Whether they want to call themselves an owner or not. Yeah, there's definitely that person. And the same thing when you see, this is why we brought up the ads. Like some ads will use, most commonly they use Bitcoin as a bait. It's like an old bait and switch, like freedom money, Bitcoin, now buy this coin. And
Yeah.
those are usually run by like exchanges,
Yeah.
which aren't really representative of anything
Yeah.
in the entire system.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. Some systems have owners. So we were talking about like Ethereum. So not only is a difference in Ethereum the software nodes, but there actually are trademarks associated with Ethereum. I believe the Ethereum name period is trademarked. The logo is trademarked.
By
The
Vitalik?
Ethereum Foundation.
Oh, okay.
Right? So now you have this controlling entity. Now they don't enforce that often. But often enough, it's often enough where if you have another fork, so remember ETH had its own major fork before Bitcoin, right before Bitcoin did, with the DAO hack. This is why you have ETH Classic. ETH Classic is the original implementation of ETH. It's not the spin-off, it's the original version. Right? That's why it's called Classic.
Yeah, right.
These were the people who believed in code is law. So, yeah, there was an exploit in the code. We coded it. That's what we wrote. That's what you have to live with.
Oh, no.
Code better,
Yeah.
right? Now, that would have killed the whole project.
Yeah.
And so the majority of the ETH community decided to move it over because the ETH Foundation and whatnot controlled the logo, has the trademarks. They got to choose where the branding went.
Right.
Right? Now, again, they're not like these overbearing critical. The ETH Classic logo, I believe, is just the ETH logo turned green. Right?
That's not a significant change, but it's
No, but right. The ETH Foundation.
yeah. They're like, oh,
Didn't
we'll have
go-
mercy on you guys.
Right. But there's an argument for that, right? So when Bitcoin had its fork, its big fork with Bitcoin Cash, who got to use the logo, the B
Yeah.
turned right, because that's the difference between the Bitcoin logo and the Bitcoin Cash logo. The Bitcoin one leans left,
Oh, wow, really?
right? And it has the orange background. The Bitcoin Cash one leans right and it's green.
Oh, wow.
But the difference is where Ethereum, the Ethereum Foundation
lean
could
forward?
enforce it.
What's right and left? Like,
Yeah, like it's tilted. One's tilted this way, one's tilted that way.
okay.
Yeah. Or the ETH Foundation or any foundation, right? Even though they're nonprofits and they claim we don't control the network, we're just a foundation who supports it. But the branding, the image, you own all these things connected to it. You sort of own the final thing because it's about who people know it for. The point you brought up, right?
Yeah.
If you own the website, don't you have some kind of influence? And yeah, it'd be silly to say no, you don't have any influence.
Yeah.
So,
but like since ETH and Ethereum are, I think you said copyrighted,
trademarked. They might be copyrighted too.
Perfect. Like if I wanted to make a T-shirt, just because I wanted to wear it, or maybe like I wanted to like sell it to a couple of my friends. Theoretically,
they could prevent that. Yep. They won't and wouldn't. It just doesn't make sense. And there are benefits. In my opinion, Satoshi wasn't a legal expert, right? Especially when it comes to intellectual property. Mm-hmm. Satoshi should have submitted a copyright for the white paper, right? Or somehow now that starts to break anonymity and stuff. So I'm sure there's very strong reasons why you don't do it, even though you can do a pseudonymous copyright.
Yeah, couldn't you do like maybe like a trust and then a trust that owns a trust and then that?
Yeah, you could try, but it's still a paper trail, right? Yeah. So I understand why they didn't do it, but the reason I say they should have done it was because once you've all a copyright is when you file a copyright, it's the government's sort of acting as a witness. Mm-hmm. It doesn't divert who really owns the copyright. It's just the government like, well, we know on this date this person said they owned it, so we know that. But they're not verifying you absolutely own it, right? Mm-hmm. But what that would have done, because once you do have that copyright, you could instantly turn it over to the public domain. Mm-hmm. Now it means nobody can copyright it. And one of the problems is you have this sort of quasi-clown, I won't even give him the benefit of sort of naming him, who claims to be Satoshi, right? And he's going through successfully suing people because nobody can prove or disprove, right? So not in the U.S., but like in Europe, I just said like Bitcoin.org hosts the white paper. Mm-hmm. It can't in Europe. This clown sued for that and it was like, it's my copyright, you're infringing on it, and the government was like, well, since we don't really know, okay, take it down. So you can't now, it's illegal to host the thing without risking a lawsuit.
Could anybody have done that? Like, hey, it's my copyright?
This is the problem with legal systems. Anybody with money.
But now that he did it, now it's kind of like what is that called? Where it's like almost like case law? Is that what it's called?
Well, it's not case law.
Where it's like, this happened before it's been proven.
Right. Yeah. It's not really case law, but it's expensive. And who wants to spend on something you don't own? Right. Who wants to spend all the time, money, resources on a frivolous sort of lawsuit claim? It's worth it if you got the money. I think a Binance or a Coinbase or some of these people who make millions and billions of dollars off of the back of some of these technologies.
Well, what does this quote unquote clown? What does he gain from doing this?
Oh, speaker fees. Some people just what's the Batman? Yeah, some people just want to see the world burn.
Yeah.
But yeah, strokes his ego. It does whatever.
Gets
nobody
his
believes
name out
it.
there, kind of thing.
Right. And there's literally a whole class of people who believe him.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of them.
Right. So, yeah, this is a downside of not actually doing that. But then you run into these other issues, right? You just had what was this on? This is on Bitcoin. We had the upgrade a few years ago with Taproot, right? And then you're building the side chain. There's this company who was building a side chain that was called Taro. And this other community was working on something called like Terra, right? Now they're very different and nobody was confusing them. But they were like, no, that's our trademark. And they actually forced to stop production of the Bitcoin side chain.
Isn't that kind of like the opposite of like what this is supposed to all be about, kind of?
This is the opposite of what this is all supposed to be about. And this is why the arguments about institutional usage, or the arguments about, some of these places that are building these types of businesses, I'm not against those. I believe in the permission. Personally, I just believe in the permissions. I think anybody should be able to use it. But to do that means you have to build something that anybody can use. You can't have something that comes along and somebody can push the stop button on. If somebody can come through and force you to stop working on something, it wasn't decentralized, it wasn't censorship resistant in the first place.
Right.
The problem is, like I said earlier, nothing is born censorship resistant.
Yeah.
The idea has to spark. One person has to convince a second, has to convince a third, and as long as it's this low containable group, you can stop it. Right? The power of a Bitcoin, and arguably the power of an Ethereum, the power of a Monero, some of these older projects, they've had enough time when not enough people cared to decentralize themselves, right?
Yeah.
A downside of Ethereum is you still have the Ethereum Foundation, Consensus, and Vitalik around. These are three central points of control where they may not control anything, but the perception is they control something. And that perception is all it takes to control something. If the three of them got together and said, we really need this protocol change, my money would go on the protocols changing.
Right.
Right? Because everybody's not a developer.
Right.
So they don't know.
Right.
They just, it sounds fancy. You said mathy words. All right, let's do it.
Right. Yeah, just like your example of like when you go to get your car fixed, like you have to just trust that they're telling you what they're telling you is like true.
Right. Your flywheel's busted. Wait, yeah, my car don't fly. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah.
So
you're low on blinker fluid.
Yeah, you're low on blinker
we'll fill
fluid.
It up.
We'll fill her up. Fill her up. Exactly. So you just sort of have to. This is where you have to trust. Where, like, I love don't trust, verify. But that means you have to be an expert area or a subject matter area expert on everything.
Right.
And so sometimes you have to find preferably in my case, how I do it, I find area experts that are unrelated to each other. Preferably they have conflict amongst each other.
Right.
They disagree publicly a lot, and they're not
So there's
buddies.
motivation to find the truth.
Well, yeah, because this is sort of how science is supposed to work, and this is all built on that.
Previously.
It's about proving everybody else wrong, not jumping on the bandwagon and say everybody else is right.
Yeah.
And so when I find people who disagree with each other on everything, but agree on this thing, all right, that's something I can lean towards more.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So yeah, who owns it? It sort of depends. Some networks, nobody owns it. If I pointed at something like Monero, but who owns Monero? I don't know. But if I pointed at something like Litecoin, I'd be like, well, Charlie Lee owns it, even though he publicly says he sold all of his Litecoin now, but he still works on it. He wants to started it. It was his brainchild. He took it to Coinbase. Like, this was his idea. And same thing with like a Vitalik, right? It's like, all right, well, you thought about it. To me, the best thing Vitalik could ever do for the Ethereum community at this point is walk away from Ethereum. You're smart. Go do something else.
Yeah.
Not forever. Give it 5 years.
Yeah, like let
the community learn how to live without you. Cosmos is a network where it was started by, I can't remember his name, Jay something. But he started the network, left for like a year, and this was started during that 2020, or left for like 2 years. The whole ecosystem learned to make decisions without that guidance. He tried to come back, and the community just rejected him. Like, no, we don't like any of your ideas.
Yeah.
Like, no, go away.
Was he sad?
He was probably, because it's like, wait, I started this thing. Now you're telling me no?
Yeah.
That's a good sign for an ecosystem that could start. These are the things you would want to look for. And, that's where, so who controls it? If you can start start naming names. Yeah.
We're off to a bad start.
Yeah. And there's not, especially if there's not a good argument against it. You're right. Like there's going to be, if society as a whole thinks Bitcoin is the most decentralized, you'll still have people who come and point to people. They're going to point to Blockstream, or they're going to point to some of the other core developers, or some of the mining pools or miners or whatever.
Yeah.
But we've seen time and time again where the people that got pointed to become irrelevant, and the network chugs along just fine. China controls it. All right, well, China, everybody left China.
Yeah.
We TikTok next block.
Yeah.
Right. So those are the kind of things you want to look for.
Yeah, it's kind of like my my YouTube short question I asked you several weeks ago.
Oh, the one that I responded to and never responded to.
Yeah, where I asked if the CIA owns. There's a rumor.
Well, and here's the gist. I'll still respond officially.
I'm like, I want to know my answer.
Here's the gist. It doesn't matter.
Right.
This is what I'm talking about. Like, it doesn't matter if the NSA, CIA, whoever invented any network. The question is, can they come in today?
Yeah, that's if it is truly decentralized.
If it's truly been decentralized.
Right. And
so there's I don't know if he's really a core dev, but he works on he builds on Bitcoin. He works on Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. This guy named Jameson Lopp. And he does a lot of analyst stuff. He's got a great website you go read if you want to, from security, all this stuff. But yeah, he published a paper where he compared basically the GitHub and all the different versions of Bitcoin since Satoshi's released. Mm-hmm. And the amount of code that's on Bitcoin right now that has been untouched since Satoshi released it is like less than 1%.
Oh, wow.
Less than 1% of Bitcoin that we know today is the Bitcoin that was launched, right? Now, I'm not saying they removed everything, but after so many people touch it, right? Mm-hmm. You build something and then I make a modification. I make 10 modifications and the person after me makes more modifications. Is it really still your code?
Right. Okay, I have a question, and I don't really know how to, ask it, but... So, if that's the case, if only 1% of the code is the original code, a couple questions just pouring out of my head right now. Who made the changes? How was it okay? Was it voted on?
No, it's decentralized. So it's like anybody can change Bitcoin's code. Anybody can change Ethereum's code, Litecoin's code, Monero's code. This is open source.
Right.
Anything that's open source.
So it's like a Wikipedia.
Yes, it's exactly like a Wikipedia.
I could put in there Ashlee is the queen of London.
Well, there's two things. So most of these projects are hosted today on GitHub, right?
Okay.
That may change. GitHub just happens to be the sort of best version for open source projects to live now. So you could go on GitHub and you have two options. You can look at whichever protocol you're looking at that's open source, and all of their code is published there. Mm-hmm. You can either try to contribute to their code. Mm-hmm. Now, this is technically a centralization point, but it's not really, right? You can either go in, only a few people can actually change the code because you have to sign up for a GitHub account. So whoever owns the GitHub account can approve who can actually make real changes.
Okay.
Right? So you can go into this one.
Wait. So GitHub can approve who can
No.
I'm sorry,
I can go if I'm a Bitcoin developer, right? Let's say I started GitHub. Mm-hmm. I take a Bitcoin software. I put it up on GitHub.
You started a GitHub?
I signed up to GitHub.
Oh, okay.
I have all of the passwords for the account. I publish the code there. I get to say, Ash can come along and modify this core code without me saying nothing. Bob cannot. He can comment on it, but he can't make the change, right? So whoever owns access to that GitHub account can do that. And of course, GitHub itself, because somebody owns GitHub, that's a centralized thing.
But could I open up my own account and put my own?
Let me finish. This is the part,
I guess I don't really understand how GitHub works.
You have two options. you can come to my version of the GitHub and you can add comments to the code like, hey, I noticed this code. I think if you change this code to be like this, it would run more efficiently or it would fix this other problem. Or, hey, if you added a whole new chunk of code right around here, it would do whatever.
So it's like peer reviewed.
It's sort of like peer reviewed. And whoever publishes that, I have my own way of consensus, but I can say, all right, well, enough of the community is good with that idea. Nobody's like leaving comments under your comment like that's a stupid idea, that's this, that, right?
Yeah.
You've justified why. It's sort of evident the community likes it.
Yeah.
So then I can push that into the next software version.
Okay.
So I can actually merge that into the main code, and then all of us can update our nodes to have that version with your code put in. That's one way Bitcoin works, or Ethereum and all of these works. The other way is you could make those comments or you cannot make those comments. They don't get merged. We don't like your idea, but it's still open source. So you can just download the entire protocol, this whole software that's in my account. Then you can go upload it anywhere you want to with the changes you want in it and say, hey, world, I have a different version. It's still Bitcoin. It still runs these core things, but I've made these modifications. If you think these modifications are cool, just download it. You don't need my permission, even though I uploaded the original software. You can just download the whole software package, make the changes, and upload it elsewhere. And again, this is sort of the difference in models in the communities between like a Bitcoin and an Ethereum as two sort of separate. Most people in Bitcoin, not everybody, but most people are like, let's just contribute to the core code, that GitHub repo one. We'll just contribute there. It's better to have all eyes here and all the brain power on this one version, right? Ethereum is like, no, I can't remember how many models, but there's like 3 or 4, maybe 5 different models. There's probably more, but key ones that people can use. And you could look at one of those in the Ethereum community. If you downloaded, let's say, Geth, which is, I think, one of the versions, you download that version and make your modifications and upload it and call it, I don't know, Ash. This is the Ash implementation of Ethereum. If the community likes it, they would probably endorse that. They're like, hey, I like that change. And that would just be another client that people run, another version of the software people run. I have
like 100,000 questions.
All right, well, we got time for like 3.
So would that software, so like you have a GitHub account, I have a GitHub account, and we're both putting code for like let's say ETH. Is that what you mean when you say there's 2 different software? Like there's more than one software?
Yes.
Like your one's a software, my one's a software, maybe Alice has a software. Okay. And then like let's say let's say the community decides that they like your version of the software, like a lot of people, like very many people. Does that mean in a sense that like you own it because like they're using your code?
No, because it's open source. I mean, I own the repo. That's the way to say it. It's like, trying to think of a good analogy piece for it. And I can't, so I'm not going to waste too much time. Maybe it'll come to me. I own the access to the version I like the most, right? And if everybody likes the version I like the most too, they can run it. But I don't really own it. I just own the modification, the store. It's like, does Walmart own Oreos?
No.
You can go to Walmart and buy Oreos, right?
Yeah.
But I could also go to, a Costco. I can go to my local grocery store and go to the corner store and get Oreos.
Right.
In this sense, Oreos are open source. Anybody can sell Oreos. We'll pretend Nabrisco.
Whatever.
We'll pretend they don't exist. Right?
Okay.
For this analogy, anybody can go pick some Oreos, or let's say apples, right? Whatever. Any place can sell them. I just like to go to this market and buy them, and so that's the version I buy. But if that market's
because they have the best Oreos. What about chocolate chip cookies?
Yeah, they have chocolate chip cookies or whatever. They have the best whatever I like.
Yeah.
But then they might decide to change the packaging. Maybe they put one less cookie in. Maybe they put too many cookies in my opinion. Maybe they add maybe they do something to this core cookie that I love.
Okay.
So I just go to a different store who doesn't do that.
Okay.
Right? And then if none of the stores have a version I like,
You make your own.
Everybody knows the recipe.
Right.
So I just make my own chocolate chip cookie. And maybe I'm the only one who's eating it. Or maybe other people are like, hey, I like your chocolate chip cookie too.
We're onto something here. This is a really good analogy.
Blockchains are cookies.
Oh my God.
Right. The important part in that analogy is that the recipe is common knowledge.
Right.
Everybody knows the recipe.
Right. Okay, very good. All right. My other question was, I wrote down, but I feel like I figured out the answer. You said if all of us download this version of the software, and then I said who is all of us, but it's just basically whoever wants to use the...
If it's permissionless, this is where the permissionless part. Anybody should be able to download and fully run it. And this is another argument you'll hear. Anybody, right? So anybody with a computing power can download a copy of the Bitcoin software, right? And run that. Anybody with computing power, right, can download a copy of the Bitcoin software and turn on the mining piece if they want to. Anybody. If you can access the software, and the software is everywhere, you can do any of those. There's nobody who tells you no. If you want to do that with Ethereum, same is true. Monero, same. These are all open. This is part of being open source and permissionless of it. Open source is how you sort of make it permissionless.
Is that why you said like, oh, I'm an owner? Because like we all own it collectively?
Yes.
Because we are the network?
We are. If you're running your own node, now if all you have is your private keys, you own your coins, but you don't contribute at all to the network. You have to run your own node if you want to run it. You don't know. I'll get into that in a minute, right? So there are XYZ protocol where if you wanted to be a miner or a validator, you actually have to ask permission. It's a closed system. They call themselves open source. They call themselves decentralized.
Right. Just for the branding of it. Or because
marketing. Nobody really knows what these words mean, which is why I become such a sort of word warrior on these topics. But at the end of the day, if I download it and I want to just push it out and become a miner or validator or whatever, and I can't, and in my view, you're not open source and somebody must own it because they told me no. Whoever's preventing me from doing it, they own the network. So that's sort of how I figure out which ones. This is a key thing. So again, when you look at the website, right, if there's only one website with a download of the software, you have to go there to get it. No place else. Not open source. Right.
Yeah, like if nobody knew the recipe for cookies and only
I'm not going to give you the recipe. You can only get that recipe here.
Then somebody owns it.
Or maybe, because like I said, nothing's born decentralized. So it's like maybe it's just on my website for now. Most people choose GitHub. There's no rule that says GitHub could shut down tomorrow. You just have to find a different way to distribute it, right? I might start there, but the thing is, like, what part of my code can you download? Can you download the whole code and see every single bit, or can you download a piece of the code? Because I'm keeping a piece private.
And how do we know that? How would we know the difference if they're only letting us download part of the code?
Usually they'll say it, but then you have to. This is where it's like you sort of have to trust. You have to know how to read code. You have to be a programmer. You have to understand cryptography. You have to understand.
A code reader would know, like, oh, there's something missing here?
Yeah. Because they'd be like, all right, once you read code, reading code is like, I know it sounds mystical and people have fear of it. It's not really that hard, right? It's actually easier than, like, learning English. No, it absolutely is easier than learning English. So you can look and just be like, wait, now this is going to sound hieroglyphically to you, but it's like, all right, this line calls a function. And that's just saying, like, this line is saying, hey, go do this other thing. And so if you're a programmer, you're looking at, like, all right, what's that other thing? And then you look through the whole code. It's like, I don't see a reference to this other thing anywhere.
Oh, I see. So that's how you know that there's a piece missing.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Like, I get what this does, but how does that function work? Right? And you should be able to get really low level and see how everything in the public facing code works. And if you can't, it's not fully open source.
Very interesting.
Right. And that's coming from a non-programmer. I'm sure there's other ways to tell, but that's how I would tell. But if you don't know how to even do that,
Yeah.
right? So that's it.
Very good.
So who owns? It depends. We all own
Yeah.
if it's truly open source.
That's right.
We are all Satoshi.
That's right.
Guy at a meetup came to our Wednesday night meetup. He had that big name tag shirt. Says, hello, my name is, and he says Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yeah.
I want to get a bunch of those shirts for like the Bitcoin birthday party or something.
Okay.
That's going to be the required wardrobe. We all have to wear that.
That's right.
Yeah, we
I
are
like
all it.
Yeah.
So,
I like it.
Yep, we'll link some resources to this on I was going to say bitcoin.org.
We can call him and ask him to.
On our very non-open source website,
Yeah.
theblockiment.com. And how else can they find us or learn more about all this?
Yeah, we're on Facebook, Twitter or X, TikTok, and YouTube.
All right. So check us out and don't trust, verify.
Yeah.
And until then, come for the riches.
Stay for the revolution.
Peace.
Peace.